Is Ekalan Hou, who is a PhD student in the History of Art and American Studies programs at Yale University. She's interested in the art of the Asian diaspora, photography and counterinsurgency, transnational migration and labor history, Afro-Asian and Asian indigenous relations, and performance and performativity of race. She received her BA with honors in art history and English from Stanford University, where she completed a thesis on the photographs of Mary Tape, Lai Yang, and Frank Ju. Please join me in welcoming Ekalan.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you, of course, to Todd and Huali for organizing this. It's a precious gathering. What you see on the screen right now on the left is the Tape family portrait taken in 1884 in the midst of the California Supreme Court case, Tape versus Hurley, a case that demanded Chinese children's equal right to education. Mamie Tape, the child standing in the center of the photograph, was turned away from Spring Valley Primary School despite California's law that every school must be open for the admission of all children between 6 and 21 years of age residing in the district. Frustrated by her daughter's exclusion, Joseph Tape retained William Gibson to sue on Mamie's behalf. The Tape's affidavit reads, "It is admitted that Joseph Tape and Mary M. Tape, the parents of the child Mamie Tape, are at present and have been domiciled in the city and county of San Francisco for more than 15 years last past. That during all this time, they have been clothed in the American costume, and that Joseph Tape discarded his queue some 15 years ago and has never worn one since. It is admitted that Mamie Tape is a child of good habits, good character, and good health, that her playmates are the American children in her neighborhood, that she is dressed as white children of her station in life, that the language used by this family in their home is the English language." The portrait taken at Thomas Arthur Brown's photo studio reflects their statement. The Tapes are dressed in American costume and pose like their respectable white counterparts. Joseph Tape rests his right hand on his thigh while his left hand encircles Emily, as Alfred Curry Rulofsson Sr. does with his child, and Mary rests her left hand in her lap, displaying her Christian wedding band and the welded brocade at her sleeve. The Tape family portrait does not merely serve as a private souvenir, but legal evidence, a public document of identity and status, and an expression of its subject's conscious will to be seen, reconstituted and remembered as such by present and future generations. Their attempt to integrate into the white middle class resulted in neither recognition nor acceptance. Although the Superior Court Justice James McGuire ruled that to deny a child born of Chinese parents in this state entrance to the public schools would be a violation of the law of the state and the Constitution of the U.S., a ruling upheld by the California Supreme Court when the school board appealed the decision, the school superintendent, Andrew Jackson Mulder, lobbied for state legislature to introduce Assembly Bill 268 to establish separate schools for children of Mongolian or Chinese descent. When such separate schools are established, Chinese or Mongolian children must not be admitted into any other schools. Mulder vowed to resist, to defeat, and to prohibit the admission of African, Chinese, and Miwok children who he claimed would demoralize our schools. The Tapes tried to send Mamie back to Spring Valley on April 7, 1885, before the opening of the Chinese primary school on the edge of Chinatown. Principal Jenny Hurley turned Mamie away despite the Supreme Court ruling, with the excuse that Mamie lacked the proper vaccination papers, and that the classes were at capacity. Mary Tape published a protesting letter to the Board of Education in the Daily Alta, writing, "You had better come and see for yourselves. See if the Tapes is not the same as other Caucasians except in features. It seems no matter how a Chinese may live and dress, so long as you know they're Chinese, then they're hated as one. There is not any right nor justice for them. May you, Mr. Mulder, never be persecuted like the way you have persecuted Mamie Tape. Mamie Tape will never attend any of the Chinese schools of your making, never. I will let the world see, sir, what justice there is when it is governed by the race-prejudiced men. Just because she is of Chinese descent, not because she don't dress like you, because she does. Mary Take took up photography herself and joined the California Camera Club in 1891 in the wake of her recognition that studio portraiture cannot suture foreignness to citizenry. I am interested in her impulse towards visibility, even with the knowledge of its failures. Her dreams of a good life and her bourgeois aspirations, even as she understood her illegibility in this visual idiom. How can her photographs and her membership in the California Camera Club be viewed in their complexity as expressions of her class and artistic aspirations, and as her centrifugal search for pockets of hiding? Her self-presentation in visual and legal archives, which precluded the truly subaltern except as the pictured, suggests an uneasy or even complicit position. She is irreducible to an essentialized ideal of the oppressed or of the elite. Focusing on her tactics of camouflage, I speak to how Tape used the appearance of assimilation precisely not to be seen. How she worked within a bourgeois medium to portray an impossible Chinese-American middle-class subjectivity in a time of their ethnographic and picturesque figuration. 3 years before Mamie Tape's trial, Will Brooks referred in The Californian to San Francisco's Chinatown as the perfect bit of broken china. He laments the possible disappearance of a picturesque people through assimilation. The discerning eye can detect the traces of an insidious undermining, he writes, which threatens in the course of time, like the wearing of a stone, to overthrow the walls of this strict exclusiveness and let in upon him the light of our greater but not so picturesque civilization. Let us rejoice that for the present the Chinaman is still heathen and perhaps unpleasant but yet undeniably picturesque. Let us look upon him for himself, regarding him more as a piece of animated bric-a-brac, which he largely resembles, than anything else. Chinese people's alignment with the picturesque, with the ruined tower, ancient architecture, all consecrated by time, to quote Gilpin, made them suitable sitters for photographs. Brooks, by situating himself in the not-so-picturesque but inevitable future of Chinatown, mourns a loss that had not yet happened but was bound to take place. Chinatown was picture perfect because it had death inscribed in its future. Chinatown's foretold extinction is nowhere more evident than in Arnold Ginta's Old Chinatown, a book of photographs published 2 years after the older, more picturesque San Francisco fell to dust and cinders in the Great Disaster of 1906. Picturesque rarely appears without old by its side in Ginta's book, and in Will Irvin's foreword to the book, he explains, if in these writings I use the past tense, I do not mean to imply that our Californian Chinese have changed their natures or their manners. It's just that your lenses and plates record only the past, and I, embroidering your work, have tried to keep in tone. The foundation of Irwin and Ginta's work is the catastrophe that has already occurred. When Irwin writes that Chinatown was falling everywhere into pictures, he evokes the concurrence of Ginta's artistic production and Chinatown's disillusion. Chinatown is the negative that never existed before Prince, the absent original that copies cannot reanimate into being, a space of simulation with which no dream of authentic contact could ever be made into flesh. Mary Tape's photographs provided examples of fugitive tactics that the ornament may use to take respite from a wide world while living in it. She understood the violence of capture. In her book, Picturing Model Citizens, Chifu contrasts Tape's photograph of her daughters, Mamie and Gertrude, with their white playmate, with Ginta's photographs of Chinatown denizens. While Ginta delighted in scaring Chinese people with his Black Devil box, twisting his mystification of Chinatown into Chinese people's superstitious fear of the camera, Tape was willing to encounter her subjects rather than set upon and symbolically conquer them. In addition to Tape's intimacy with her sitters, Fu notes that Tape's photographs suggest the possibility of integration. It is not set in a forbidden space impenetrable to most white people except the intrepid photographer, but presents the commingling of white and Chinese children. Tape not only subverted conventions of Chinatown street photography, but also used strategies of diversion to shield her children from the camera. The fruits in Mamie's hands form a still life against the white dress that serves as their tablecloth, with what may as well be a localized study of Cézanne's grapes and peach on a plate. Tape involves the viewers in a game that the girls in the photograph play. We too are focused on the fruits that are the subjects of the white girl's choice and of Mamie's hiding. In addition to the composition within the composition, the background of Tape's photograph distracts from its subjects. At first glance, the slanted lines across the wall seem to be the shadows of exposed beams and ridges, and the thin rectangle behind the white girl appears to be a door leading to the inside of a house. This assumption falters, however, when one realizes that the shadows do not extend to the ground, nor do they extend to the door that now resembles more a curtain hanging off a beam. The recession of the lines also confounds. Where do they lead? Do they end at a staircase or lapsiding? Why do they recede so much more steeply than the boardwalk upon which the girls stand? Trapping viewers in the act of questioning with the razzle-dazzle background, Tape forestalls their consignment to "that has been." She twists reification into a riddle to avert the catastrophe of the photograph. The girls are not reducible to a picture, but become an enigma. They hold off the possessive eye with an unanswerable but insistent puzzle. The effectiveness of Tape's strategies may be measured by the extent to which they were resisted in copies of her photograph. In Leland Gamble's feature of her in the San Francisco Morning Call, he writes that the lantern slides that Tape takes pride in are fully worth it, as some of the reproductions in the article will prove. The article features which hand do you choose on the top right of the screen, but the print is altered from the original. In the print of the three girls, only the white girl is still wearing a plain dress, while Mamie's floral and Gertrude's plaid dress distract from the fruits in Mamie's hands. The fruits have also devolved into unintelligible outlines. The grapes resemble kale, and the peach fuses with its shadow to become a carrot, if not a knife. The still life dissolves into a hodgepodge of patterns, if not a subconscious threat, and the background is cropped and bleached. Both points of diversion are eliminated. The doorway that frames the original photograph is also removed. All barricades that establish critical distance and prevent the viewer's uninhibited access to the girls are all done. Mamie and Gertrude become available once more as picturesque victims of the camera, another iteration of Genta's tiny yellow flowers. The pursuit of the picturesque didn't end at Chinatown's borders, but extended to the American West. Elizabeth Hempston writes, "In Land, in Time and Space, the West and the camera shutter opened up together, each rushing the other along, as photographs recorded and bragged about and advertised the new lands." A group of self-taught photographers formed the Pacific Coast Amateur Photographic Association in 1883, and at the association's third annual exhibition in 1888, a reviewer from the Daily Alta remarks that California's climatic conditions, beauty of landscape, and general picturesqueness of scenery all greatly favor the work of the camera. The amateur photographers regarded themselves as pioneers who transformed the wilderness into respectable objects for contemplation. The picturesque shored up the imperialist ego. All that the eye can see ought to be subdued by the westward moving eye. In 1890, George W. Reed, a member of the Pacific Coast Amateur Photographic Association, expelled for selling his photographs of the Golden Gate on a royalty basis, formed the California Camera Club. The club was open to all who were interested in photography, both amateurs and professionals. It provided them with a large darkroom and a portrait studio, arranged monthly outings to enrich its corpus of the finest California scenic views, and put forth its own photography journal, the Pacific Coast Photographer, from 1892 to 94, and Cameracraft thereafter. The club would grow to become the largest camera club in the United States by 1900, recording 425 active members in the same year. Mary Tate became a member of the club in 1891 and was featured in the Pacific Coast Photographer in the following year. She is referred to as a bright and intelligent Americanized Chinese lady who is becoming a slide expert. She probably does what but few amateurs have undertaken, the manufacture of her own slide plates. The Camera Club's recognition of Tate did not preclude its members from perceiving the Chinese as a primitive people to be dominated and Chinatown as a tourist destination. Club members photographed the Panama Pacific International Exhibition, where a walkthrough exhibit named Underground Chinatown entertained visitors with wax figures of Chinese smokers inviting white people into opium dens, slave traffickers plotting abductions of white women, and prostitutes beckoning to passers-by. They displayed photographs in the Liberal Arts Building at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, where Mary Tate's grandchildren, Emily and Harold, wore spectacles in the human zoo that was the Chinese village. In a photo album of club outings, a group of white club members also dressed themselves in Qing clothing and took group portraits holding fans. They flirted with other ways of experiencing the universe and sampled Chineseness like an excursion to Yosemite or Santa Cruz. It was a trip without consequence, a taste of the exotic that only reinscribed the status quo. Given all this, how did Mary Tate, who recognized California Camera Club and Western expansionism's irreversible influence, resist their imperializing eye? Tate protects her children through concealment and camouflage. It is difficult to notice Frank, Emily, and Gertrude in Tate's photograph of Cascade Cottage at first glance. The immediate focus of the photograph is the erect flagpole at its center. Echoed by the vertical composition and the trees that reach skyward, the image is a reflection of the national ego par excellence. The U.S. brings order and provides anchorage to wilderness while inheriting its majesty. Supplementing the immaculate uprightness of the flag is its excessive multiplication. The patriotic reminder appears at the entrance of the cottage and replicates itself at every column. The human subjects are easily overlooked in the photograph and hide in its patriotic proclamations. Gertrude leans against the gate, her body is covered by the fence, and her head blends into the lights and shadows of the thicket behind her. Frank is a chameleon on the staircase. His dark suits allow him to fuse with the steps while his hat catches the lightness of the handrail. Emily peeks from behind the flagpole and mimics it with her wide colonial dress. Familiar with Abbott Thayer's Concealing Coloration in the Animal Kingdom, published a year after Emily and Harold were displayed at the St. Louis World's Fair, Tate knew the room's ambiguity that photographic tones allowed. In this photograph, Frank, Emily, and Gertrude could be naturalized within the landscape in their various disguises and secrete themselves in an image of nationalism that they are deemed too foreign to take part in. During one of my exchanges with the Chinese-American photographer Reagan Louie, who lives in and pictured Chinatown in the 1970s, he shared the following thoughts about Chinatown's alleyways. Chinatown's alleyways receive little daylight, remaining mostly in shadow. In the brief moments when the sun shines into the narrow lanes, the light casts calligraphic shadows against the walls, a fleeting poem to the spirit and life of Chinese people. Like the momentary sunlight, the alleyways are fugitive spaces, impermanent, transient. Historically, Chinatown alleyways were havens for actual fugitives, paper sons. Well hidden in the shadows, life could go on furtively. Contrary to Ginter's reified vision of Chinatown and California Camera Club members' desire to suspend a civilization mid-decay, Louis describes Chinatown's alleyways as shifting spaces that reflect and shelter people trying to evade capture. For Louis, what is at stake is the fugitive movement in and out of the frame, or whatever externally imposed logic. I see echoes of Louis' words in Tate's photographs from more than a century ago, even if her works vied for recognition as much as they created hidings. In her portrait of her husband, Joseph Tate's body passes errant as the wisteria's shadow, soon fading, soon disappearing. The camera touches him only momentarily, the way the eclipse of a petal grazes his forehead or meets his shoulder. Thank you.